So I want to go over this article that I published on my Medium because I think that the topic, AMLO, Morena, and Mexico's indigenous people, is very important. And what led me to write this article is my experience where, I'm a Mexican living in the United States, and if I decide to voice support for Mexico's 65th president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, it's not uncommon to hear a lot of criticism, especially from those on the progressive left, and also people from the right, from the center, people of Mexican and non-Mexican heritage. So I really, really wanted to understand this issue better for myself, so that I could see, well, is it truly the case, as the critics like to say, that AMLO is not supported by the indigenous people of Mexico? I am mestizo, so a mixture of indigenous and European heritage. So, like most Mexicans today, of course, most are mestizos, but of course, there are many indigenous Mexicans, and we obviously want their voices to be heard. And so, if I hear that a president that I certainly support, AMLO, is not popular among the indigenous population, I want to kind of examine that. And I think it's important, whenever we hear any kind of claims about really any elected officials, it's important to look at the facts. So that's what I tried to do in this article that you can read on my Medium. But it really comes down to this. Is AMLO supported by the indigenous population or not? There are many people in the United States, especially on the left, who essentially say, no, he's not. But that really does not square, certainly with the way that AMLO, discusses Mexico's history and the role that the state has played in oppressing indigenous communities, and certainly doesn't go with what he does essentially, every weekend when he tours up and down the country, and he certainly honors a lot of indigenous people. There seems to be a lot of, at least from his speeches, a lot of the audience members are indigenous. He's kind of had a very long trajectory with the indigenous population. His one of his first jobs coming out of college was with working with the indigenous population, helping them with language issues, and standing up for their language rights, for their rights to not be polluted by the state oil company, which was polluting the area of the Chontal Maya in his home state of Tabasco. So he famously kind of stood up in 1995, to stop this drilling that was going on, and that was a movement of indigenous people. So again, it really always strikes me when people will say that he has no support among the indigenous population, or that he doesn't support the indigenous population. It's kind of the opposite. I have actually found through the investigation that I tried to do here, because it's really important that we get the facts straight if we're going to criticize any public official. So I decided to look into the numbers, which are available to basically anyone who has an internet connection. And the core question is, how do the indigenous people of Mexico feel about AMLO and his party, the Morena party? So we can actually look at many bits of evidence. We can look at, for example, the Mexican election survey of 2018. So that was done by CIVE, which is a well-respected research institute in Mexico. They do a whole lot of surveys for many elections. So if you actually look at their published information that they collected from talking to Mexicans, what you'll see is that about half of indigenous Mexicans voted for Lopez Obrador. So you can look at that in the survey. About exactly 49% of the indigenous Mexicans in the survey just said that they voted for Obrador in 2018. So that's right. That's half of indigenous people, essentially. You can clearly see how the second place is way far behind. You can look at how mestizos voted 45% for Obrador, and white Mexicans were at 42%. So it's pretty clear that all three groups, there was sizable support for AMLO. And in fact, indigenous Mexicans, according to the survey, supported him even a little bit more than mestizo Mexicans or white Mexicans. So you wouldn't get that from all the hearsay that we see on the U.S. left. So that's why I thought it was important to look at that. And then, well, someone could ask, well, what about if you only look at, say maybe some groups that allegedly don't support AMLO and Morena. So, for example, there's been a lot of social media posts saying that the Zapatistas, in the southern state of Chiapas, do not support AMLO and Morena. So we can actually, kind of focus in on that survey that I just talked about, and we can see, well, what were the numbers like in Chiapas? And if we do that, what we actually find is that Obrador was even more popular among the indigenous people of Chiapas than he was, in the other parts of the country. 73% of the indigenous people of Chiapas said that they voted for Obrador. So obviously that's a huge number, almost 3 out of 4 indigenous Mexicans in Chiapas, in the Zapatista area, saying that they voted for him. And maybe some people would say, well, that's just a survey. What about the cold hard numbers, right? So those are published by Mexico's election institute, and these numbers are again available for anyone to look at, and you can see that actually Obrador won every single district in Chiapas, most by quite a number of percentage points. He's got hundreds of thousands of votes, a total of 1,485,000 votes in Chiapas, compared to the next largest vote count with for the PRI, about 562,000, and then the PAN, the Conservative Party, a lot less populous, less than 200,000 votes. So the votes are pretty clear that Obrador swept the southern state of Chiapas in 2018. He won every district. So it's pretty clear that overall the people of Chiapas do support Obrador, or certainly voted for him in 2018. Now, of course, it's been 6 years since 2018 when Obrador was elected. Maybe things have changed, right? People could say that. So we can actually look at yet another public opinion poll, right? Like we can look at the Barómetro de las Américas, which is a long-running public opinion poll conducted by U.S. universities. And that poll actually asked people, how would they qualify AMLO's government, on a 5-point scale. And if you look at that, what you actually find is that, again, all three of the major ethnic groups, indigenous Mexicans, mestizo Mexicans, and white Mexicans, all three of those groups, they tended to say that Obrador's government was good, if not very good. So it's not the case that there is a resounding rejection of AMLO among the general population, and it's not the case either among the indigenous population. Indigenous population is actually a little bit higher. They're at an average of 4.1 support for AMLO's government. Mestizos and whites are at an average of like 3.9. So overall, that's high general support for AMLO. And it's even a little bit higher among indigenous Mexicans. Again, going against the narrative that we keep hearing in U.S. corporate media and in left-oriented social media, that they think that the indigenous population of Mexico is rejecting Obrador. The numbers just don't line up with that narrative. And now you may wonder, well, okay, that's Obrador, AMLO, but what about the Morena party itself? So that survey that I just outlined actually asked people also how much do they identify with essentially a political party. And not everybody identifies with a political party, but those that do, guess what? The vast majority are identifying with Morena. And that's the case for indigenous Mexicans, mestizo Mexicans, and white Mexicans. So the Morena party is very popular with all groups. And again, the bar shows they're even slightly more popular with indigenous Mexicans than they are with other groups. So that really leads to this realization that we have to have, which is that if we're going to criticize any elected official from any country, we really should think about what are the facts and what are the fictions. In this case, there is a fiction out there that AMLO, his government, and the Morena party are not popular among the indigenous people of Mexico. But the numbers, which are available to anyone with an internet connection who bothers to look through them, the numbers clearly say that AMLO and Morena have broad-scale support among the general population in general, and especially among the indigenous population of Mexico. Now, maybe some people don't like to hear that, but those are the facts. And so we got to work with those, but we should not suppress them or think that they're somehow different. The reality is that Obrador's government is very popular, including among the indigenous population, including among the indigenous population of the South, of Chiapas, of the Zapatista areas. So that's why we have to look at the facts and not fall prey to the corporate media or to the social media that is inaccurate, to say the least.